Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you like this episode, please remember to hit the like button and leave a comment or two, then subscribe and click on the bell to receive notifications of whenever we release new videos. Also, please remember to share them to your social media.
Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks.
Today's episode takes us to the Gravelly Range in the Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest in southwest Montana. The Gravellys, as locals refer to them, are a remote and isolated geographic area with very little road access. It is the largest expanse of natural prairie in Montana that is undisturbed. The elevation here varies from 7,400 to 9,500 feet and showcases subalpine grasslands and conifer forests rolling like great waves of green. Many people make the trip to this area to hike and view the numerous wildflowers that bloom from June through July each year. Over 250 species of plants call this area home, along with elk, deer, moose, and pronghorn antelope. The predators in the Gravellys include coyotes, wolves, cougars, bobcats, and black bears, as well as a growing population of grizzly bears. In late fall, food sources for grizzly bears begin to decrease in quality and amount. They have spent the spring and summer browsing succulent greens and devouring delicious berries, amassing needed fat for hibernation, and all that effort culminates in a peaceful retreat into a den for the winter. When the grogginess of torpor begins to set in, grizzlies will begin to search for an ideal place to excavate themselves a den on the upper one-third of 30 to 60 degree slopes on the north face of mountains. Researchers indicate that they prefer to make their dens at elevations between 6,000 and 10,000 feet, but the reasons are not clearly explained. After 3 to 7 days of digging, their den will be finished. The bears will spend up to 6 months in a state of torpor, in which their bodily functions slow down while they rest. They can wake up easily if they do not manage to store enough body fat. On Saturday, October 21, 2023, a hunter, whom we will call Tom, was hiking the meadow edges and glassing for game. There are several game animals in season at this time of year in Montana, and Tom could take any animal for which he had a tag. The sign of animals in the area is a constant sight here because there are so many. You can hardly walk 30 yards before coming across a deer track or an elk track. Grizzly tracks, on the other hand, are fewer and far between, and a definite precursor that should keep your head on a swivel for their presence. Unbeknownst to Tom, one of the area's giant sow grizzlies was just around the bend from his location. She had spent the summer eating as much food as she could in the valleys and had made her way up to the high country to find a good place to hibernate. The northern slope of the mountain she picked was a prime location with soil that allowed her to dig a nice deep den. Because it was the northern exposure of the mountain, it was thick with trees and bushes which would act as insulation while she waited the winter out. She used her massive paws, tipped with long, sharp claws, to pull the human equivalent of a shovel of dirt out of her denning spot with each rake of her paws. This bear had had a great year in terms of food and was in prime condition. She was what humans would consider a good bear, in that she had never had any conflicts with people or their dwellings, sticking to herself and leaving the people and their animals alone. As Tom hiked through the trees, scanning for movement, the bear continued to dig her den. The most dangerous part about a bear digging a den is that once the den gets deep enough for them to crawl halfway into, they are nearly invisible to anyone passing by. With their heads buried deep in their den, they can't hear, see, or smell anyone approaching them in time to give themselves a chance to escape. This combination of time of year, denning needs, and human recreation was just about to culminate in a horrible and terrifying event that both parties would probably rather avoid. Pushing his way through the brush, Tom's path must have taken him right next to the opening of the grizzly's den. By the time he heard her whoof at him, he knew he was way too close for comfort. He glanced up and could see the bear's powerful paws crashing their way through the undergrowth and closing the few yards that separated them. He knew that it would be a horrible gamble to lose betting the bear was bluffing as she charged toward him. He had less than a few seconds to decide what to do and do it, or potentially lose his life. Tom raised his hunting rifle to his shoulder and fired when the bear was scant feet from him. His bullet hit the off switch on the bear's life as she piled up and laid still. The inanimation of death is a sad thing, and to witness it in an animal you didn't intend to kill can be heart-rending. Most hunters have no desire to shoot or injure an animal they do not get to keep and consume, and I think it is safe to say that Tom must have felt the same sentiments. As the surprised bear lay dead, Tom knew he had to get a hold of the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks authorities so they could understand what had transpired. He quickly made his way back down the mountain to his vehicle, and as soon as he was in range, he contacted them with the details of the incident. The authorities sent a response team to the location at which they could find the bear's body, according to Tom. They traveled to the scene of the incident and examined the grizzly's remains. The forensic evidence told the story very clearly. They could see the bear's tracks at the den site indelibly pressed into the loose soil she had pulled from the inside of it. Following her tracks as she bounded toward Tom confirmed his story of self-defense. They decided his defense of his life was a valid reason for killing the grizzly. They notified him that he would not be cited for any violations. In an initial analysis, the United States Fish and Wildlife Agency is still completing its investigation of the attack, and results have yet to be made publicly available. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I am left with a few questions for you. How do you think Tom could have possibly avoided this confrontation with the grizzly? Do you think Tom was making noise, and that brought the sow out of her den? How difficult is it to spot a grizzly who is at least partially concealed in a den she is digging? Do you think bear spray may have prevented this attack and possibly saved the bear's life? How could this encounter have been worse than it was? I will be glad to read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comment section below and let's talk about it.
Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks.
Today's episode takes us to the Park Highway in Denali National Park, Alaska. This stretch of road winds its way from Denali Park headquarters through the heart of the park with many stunning and majestic overlooks on the beautiful terrain. The geography here is steep mountain slopes topped with snowfall nearly year-round, with valleys filled with alder, willow, and a few scattered stands of birch, aspen, and spruce trees. The Park Highway allows park visitors an immersive experience in the wilds of the park. From this highway, visitors can hike trails and climb to vantage points to see moose, caribou, and Dall sheep. The predators of the park include coyotes, wolves, lynx, black bears, as well as grizzly bears. Near mile marker 7 is a steep mountainside on the north side of the highway. On September 11, 1973, a man by the name of Alfred Johnson was out taking pictures for the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. Now, the source I have for this attack doesn't indicate Alfred's age, but I think it is safe to assume he was a young pup because an older man would know better than to do what he did. While Alfred hiked the pictorial peaks and sublime slopes, popping pictures of postcards unseen, something caught his attention. On the hill above him he noticed not one or two, but 4 grizzly bears grazing their way across a clearing only 100 yards away from him. He was excited that none of the bears had noticed him being so close. It was apparently a sow with 3 larger cubs from the year prior. Spotting a spruce tree not too far from the bears, Alfred decided to do something that was apparently entertaining to him. He sneaked around the bears and climbed a tree. Then he began making sounds like a rabbit in distress to see what the bears' reactions would be. Now, a little bit of information about spruce trees is in order to understand Alfred's predicament. Spruce trees can be fairly large, but in this location don't get very tall compared to their southern counterparts. Their growth season is brief, so they are shorter overall. They also have branches very low to the ground, which acts as an insulative barrier during winter, but it also makes them easy to climb, even for grizzlies. Alfred watched the 4 grizzlies from his apparently safe perch high in the tree, but could see the sow ignoring his attempts to get her attention. He was under the impression that grizzlies couldn't climb trees, and his shenanigans couldn't possibly get him into any hot water. He decided to keep it up, but she simply didn't buy the idea that there was a wounded rabbit near her. Alfred decided to continue his dying rabbit act until the sow suddenly raised her head and glared in his direction. She quickly blurred toward the tree he was precariously perched in. Once the sow got to the trunk of the tree, she looked up at the man for a few seconds, then stood to her hind legs. The sow reached her paw up into the tree and stepped one of her hind legs onto a lower branch, just like Alfred did to climb the tree. To Alfred's surprise, this sow climbed the spruce tree in pursuit of the source of that annoying sound. The sow somewhat clumsily climbed the spruce tree high enough that she could reach his left foot. Alfred was not only surprised that he ran into the first grizzly bear to ever climb a tree, but he was also terrified at the fact that she was close enough to clamp her jaws onto his ankle. This spruce tree now had the weight of a man and a very large grizzly bear precariously perched on its branches. I cannot find a source on the internet that tells me how much weight a medium-sized spruce tree can support, but I am pretty sure that the two of them were stressing those limits. As the grizzly reached the height of Alfred's ankle, she sank her giant canines into his flesh and punched right through his pants, socks, and tissues. Pain shot through Alfred's body as the consequence of bringing a foolish idea into reality hit him. Once she latched her jaws onto his ankle, she used her immense weight to pull him from the spruce tree by relaxing her own grip on the tree. The enormous force of the weight of the sow quickly overwhelmed Alfred's grip on the tree, and the universal force of gravity took over from there. As Alfred tumbled toward the ground, bouncing off of spruce boughs, I wonder what went through his mind. He must have been regretting coming up with such a foolish idea. I imagine at some point he thought he should have listened more to his mother when she instructed him not to tease animals. Alfred and the sow came crashing to the ground at the base of the spruce tree in a heap. He was dazed and disoriented, but the sow didn't waste any time in taking out her anger on that source of chronic irritation to her and her cubs. Alfred lifted his hands to block her swats as she slashed him about the head with her claws, tearing his scalp severely. The sow didn't spare his neck and arms either. She slashed and bit him from hand to hand and back up his neck just to make sure he got the point of each of her teeth. As we have discussed before in prior episodes, when bears bite into flesh, they pull, which tears wound cavities deep in the tissues. These cavities fill with blood and cause painful bruising despite not breaking the skin. It is also these wound cavities that, if punctured by the canine teeth, can host serious and even deadly infections. By the time the grizzly was done taking out her frustration on Alfred, he had suffered puncture wounds from her teeth and gashes from her claws over his head, neck, and both arms. He was a painful and bloody mess as a result of angering this protective mama bear. When she had decided Alfred had had enough, she slowly meandered back in the direction of her cubs to make sure they were okay. As soon as the coast was clear, Alfred slowly worked his way back to his feet. He probably wasn't as dizzy from blood loss as much as he was from the violence and speed of the sow's attack. He tried to assess his injuries, but they were simply too many to examine while in the presence of an angry grizzly. His blood had soaked his clothes, but he was able to hike the 1/2 mile back to the highway, where he had parked his vehicle. There is no source indicating how many stitches or sutures it took to close his wounds, but I am sure each painful stitch was etched in his memory. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I have a few questions for you. Do you think it is wise to make sure you don't make any noise that sounds like a prey animal while you are in bear country? Was it the sound of a dying rabbit that brought the sow to his tree, or was she irritated by him? What lessons do you think the cubs observed or learned by watching Alfred being mauled? I will be glad to read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below and let's talk about it.
Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks.
Today's episode takes us to Igloo Mountain, which lies just west of Denali National Park in Alaska. This mountain is a large rock dome with brushy and wooded hillsides sloping to thick riparian zones along the water's edge. Visibility is limited at human height, which is probably why animals here smell scents from far away. This area is located north of 61 degrees latitude, which means that plant life here competes for rare resources. On the northern slopes of mountains, the trees tend to be shorter as the daylight they receive is limited. The south-facing mountains have more exposure, so the tendency of plant life to grow taller and bushier helps them gather more energy from the sun. Alaska birch, black cottonwood, black spruce, and aspen trees are the most common trees, with a myriad of grasses and bushes growing in between. These plant resources provide food to animals like caribou, moose, muskox, and sheep, which in turn are food for predators like wolves and grizzly bears. At 3:50 p.m., on August 4, 1961, Napier Shelton was increment boring on a spruce tree on Igloo Mountain. He was an ecologist and a graduate of Duke University. The increment boring process entails the use of a small mechanical auger that cuts free a core of wood the size of a pencil from a tree. The wood core is then analyzed by scientists to gather information about tree populations in the area. Napier was tasked with finding certain species of trees and pulling these cores from the trees. As he went from tree to tree,
He would carefully take a brief moment to examine the tree, then lay out his boring equipment before beginning to use the auger. This entire process can take 10 to 20 minutes for each sample, and one by one, they are placed in the collection from each forest sampled. As Napier approached his next and last tree, he laid out his auger and other tools as he examined the tree. This tree was about 25 feet tall and was 14 inches across its trunk. It was a somewhat peculiar tree as it grew at nearly a 90-degree angle from the surface of the mountain. Its limbs grew to the base of the tree and were close together, almost like ladder rungs. He placed the cutting bit against the bark of the tree and began twisting the handle on the auger. After a few moments of effort, the auger sank into the tree and the sample wood began to fill the core cavity.
Napier couldn't have known that he was very near a grizzly bear, but perhaps the bear knew he was close to Napier. It isn't clear if the bear smelled his scent on the breeze or stumbled into Napier, but it is clear it didn't like him being nearby. As Napier worked with his auger, a loud whoof sound startled him. It was a bear, and it was very close to him. His first instinct was to freeze, but he knew he would have to see the bear to check what it was doing. Napier quickly turned his head and could see a huge grizzly closing in on him fast. He could see its muscles ripple with energy with each leap it made toward him. He knew he wouldn't have much time and the bear would be on him. Napier couldn't afford to see if the bear was bluffing or bent on attacking him, so he reached up and grabbed the lowest branch of the tree from which he was taking the core sample. As the bear closed in on him, Napier managed to get several feet off the ground. With each limb he pulled himself past, the more certain he was that he was going to be safe. Napier climbed to a point and then wrapped his arms around the tree. As he glanced down to the ground, he had hoped to see a grizzly bear frustrated at his escape or perhaps turning around and leaving. Instead, to his horror, he saw the massive grizzly using the exact limbs he used to pull himself into the tree, to do the same but faster. The bear climbed the tree so quickly that within a few seconds it was nipping at Napier's heels. Seeing the bear right behind him in the tree, Napier tried to pull his leg up to the next branch when he suddenly felt a significant resistance. Pain shot through his left calf muscle as the bear drove its teeth through it. The grizzly tugged and pulled at Napier's calf in a powerful attempt to dislodge the man from the tree. Napier's grip gave way and he slipped down the tree several inches each time the grizzly pulled on his calf. After a particularly aggressive pull, the bear's teeth tore through Napier's calf muscle and the bear slid down the tree trunk, bouncing over the limbs. As soon as it landed, the bear immediately began to climb back toward Napier. As the bear climbed back toward Napier's position, he tried to climb higher, but there wasn't anywhere further to go up the tree. The bear managed to climb higher than he did before and reached the same height as the man's thigh muscles. The grizzly bit and tugged at Napier's right thigh this time. It tore open massive gashes in his flesh as he clung to the tree for life. This situation pulled him out of his passive hope the bear would leave him alone. He began kicking the bear with his injured left leg. Napier gave the bear the boot several times before sending it toppling down the trunk of the tree once more. As soon as the bear hit the ground, it stood back to its feet and looked up at the man. The grizzly didn't know for sure what to think and demonstrated this by walking around the tree a couple of times before slowly walking off. Napier watched as the dark shape of the bear began to disappear as it got farther and farther away. He wasn't about to pile out of the tree and run into that bear again. The man waited about 30 minutes before slowly venturing down the tree. He searched the brush and bushes to see if the bear was lying in wait for him, but it wasn't. Napier wasted no time trying to get back to the road, where he hoped he would find people who may help him. Once he arrived on the road, he stumbled upon a person and relayed the story of his altercation with the bear. His newfound friend observed the injuries that plagued Napier's legs. He could see one giant gash that led into another giant gash on his left calf. He looked over his right thigh and could see several large puncture wounds that were punched deep into his muscle. His wounds were not bleeding a tremendous amount but looked horrible. Napier was rushed to a nearby hospital but was soon flown to Fairbanks where he healed and completely recovered. There was nothing in the records to indicate what happened with the bear. I think it is safe to assume that the bear was left alone and was never shot by any official. After reviewing the facts surrounding this episode, I have a few questions for you. Do you think that the bear sneaked up on Napier is proof that this attack was predatory? Why do you think a scientist would not carry a firearm into the Alaskan wilderness?
How would you describe the feeling of glancing down a tree you had just climbed to see a giant grizzly bear climbing up after you? I will gladly read and reply to your thoughts, so please post them in the comments section below, and let's talk about it.
Thank you for watching Scary Bear Attacks. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider clicking on the like button and clicking on the bell icon. We'll help you know when we post our new episodes. Posting our video links to your social media profiles furthers awareness, and it's fun. We slashed our prices in our merch store, linked below, so check out the bargains there while you shop. As a member of our human community, remember to adventure bravely and be careful out there, especially in bear country.